Bulletproof Radio, a state of high performance.
Outside of your new book about the program, that here's the steps you take book, you are interested in a bunch of technologies, some of which I've talked about on the show, but other restorative, rejuvenative technologies. What are some of the things that you're looking at that might be effective in just making people more resilient?
Yeah, it's a great point. So you and I talked about EWAT before, which I think has been very interesting. And, if you look at what Alzheimer's, and, I didn't start in functional medicine, I started in the lab. And so I really believe in functional medicine because that's where the lab led us. If there hadn't been a functional medicine, we would have had to say, well, what the heck is this stuff? So the fact of the matter is that if you look at the molecular pathways that drive the degenerative process, the most fundamental nature of what's happening to our brains is that this is an insufficiency. And again, when you step back and say, wait a minute, Alzheimer's is an insufficiency, well, duh. It makes sense. Your brain is involuting because the entire balance sheet is on the wrong side. You've got a demand for these 500 trillion synapses that you have, and you have a supply. And as we get a little older, and of course it can happen younger if you've got certain exposures, it can happen older if you're doing well, but at some point, if you are on the wrong side of that ledger chronically, then your brain says, I cannot afford 500 trillion synapses. How about 400 trillion synapses? And you start, you're starting to lose these things, no surprise, and you feel it. And if you don't discover why you are on the wrong side of that ledger and reconcile that, if you don't discover that and rectify it, then it will be continuing to downsize, as we see. And ultimately, you lose your speech, and you lose your ability to care for yourself, and on, and you die of Alzheimer's. And in fact, 45 million of the currently living Americans will die of Alzheimer's. That's 100 times as many as will die of COVID-19 in the worst projections. So this is 100 times the pandemic. It's not as quick of a pandemic, of course, but over the long haul, it is a huge, huge problem. And therefore, it behooves all of us to find out where we stand, which side of the ledger we're on. And the great news is you have years and years before you have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. So you have a long time, and we recommend anyone 45 years of age or older, get a cognoscopy, find out where you stand. Just like you want to know your blood pressure and your cholesterol, you want to know where you stand with respect to your synaptoblastic versus synaptoclastic signaling. And you want to get yourself on the synaptoblastic side, making synapses so that you can learn new things. You can do your everyday activities instead of being on the synaptoclastic side, which so many of us are. So over the years, we are losing synapses because of dozens and dozens of different things that we can identify. Everything from your immune system status to your hormonal levels, to your BDNF levels, to your plasmalogens. All these sorts of things are critical. So that is key. And you mentioned what can you do things. I don't know if you've talked about Katsu yet. Katsu's very interesting. Have you tried this?
We had the guys from Be Strong on, and Be Strong is related. It's temporary hypoxia, but it's a little bit less painful than Katsu. But it's very similar methodologies.
Interesting, yeah. So the bottom line is this is an interesting period where we can do so much, and obviously as a world expert biohacker, you know this better than anyone. We can do so much that is not being done by standard of care medicine. And now, of course, everyone can look at their heart rate variability and their microbiomes and their 23andMe and their ketone status and their continuous glucose monitoring and and their SpO2 at night, everything, all these critical things. And of course, we can now pick them up. We have a new app that does this, so that you can pick up all these things and see.
What's your new app?
Modified self. It's called the Recode app.
This is the Recode app. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So it just looks at these various pieces, and it can follow your nocturnal oxygenation and follow your ketone levels and all these critical things. And again, We're dealing with a scenario in which you have a chronic insufficiency. And yes, your brain needs oxygen, it needs blood flow, it needs ketones, it needs other combustible substrates like glucose and things like that in the correct amounts. It needs the lipids, and you just go right down the list. There are dozens and dozens of things. And unfortunately, when you go to an expert center for Alzheimer's, they do not measure these things. And then they tell you, because they're not looking beneath the surface.